Hey, welcome back to CRMONCE. Today we're tackling something every serious Dataverse developer eventually needs: custom APIs. Quick refresher: Dataverse is the database and business logic engine that sits underneath Power Apps, Power Automate, and Dynamics 365. Think of it as a smart filing cabinet that also enforces your business rules. For years, if you wanted custom server-side logic exposed as an API, you built a custom action, an old XML-based mechanism. It works, but it's clunky, weakly typed, and painful to maintain. In this video, I'll show you the modern replacement: custom APIs built with C and the plugin registration tool. You'll see them show up automatically in the Web API and in Power Automate's dynamic schema, and we'll call one from a console app and a canvas app. Let's dive in. Before we click anything, let's understand why this shift matters. A custom action is a workflow defined in XML, registered as a message. It's flexible, but every parameter is essentially untyped, so consuming apps have to guess the shape of the data. A custom API, by contrast, is defined with real metadata. You declare each request parameter and response property with an actual type, like string, boolean, or entity reference. Because that metadata lives in Dataverse itself, both the Web API, that's the HTTP doorway other applications use to read and write your data, and Power Automate can read it and build a proper typed discoverable interface automatically. No more guessing field names from documentation. Next concept: bound versus unbound. A bound custom API is attached to a specific table or even one specific row, kind of like a button that only appears on an invoice because it only makes sense in the context of that invoice. For example, expire. Quote only makes sense when you already have a quote. An unbound custom API has no starting record at all. It behaves like a global utility function you can call from anywhere. For example, getExchangeRate, which just takes a currency code and returns a number. When you design your own API, ask yourself, does this operation need a thing to act on? If yes, bind it. If it's pure calculation or lookup, leave it unbound. Now let's see how a request actually travels through Dataverse once you call your custom API. Picture an assembly line. The client, your app, flow, or console program, sends the request. It enters Dataverse's message processing pipeline, which is just an ordered set of stages Dataverse always runs. First, any pre-operation plugins fire, letting other code inspect or block the call. Then your core operation, the actual CRMONCE logic behind your custom API, executes. Finally, post-operation logic runs and the response is built and sent back. A plugin, by the way, is just a small piece of CLI code Dataverse automatically triggers at one of these stages. Let's get hands-on. This is the plugin registration tool, a small connected utility you use to register plugins and custom APIs against your environment. I'm creating a new custom API here. First thing you set is the unique name. This becomes the actual message name that Dataverse and the Web API will use to invoke your logic. So I'm typing new expire quote, prefix clearly so it doesn't collide with anyone else's code. Next to it, name and display name are what humans and low-code tools will actually see later in Power Automate's action picker. So I'm labeling this one expire quote. Now watch the bound type field. Remember our earlier concept. Bound means this operation is tied to a specific table. I'm setting bound type to entity, which tells Dataverse this custom API only makes sense when it's running against one existing row, not floating around unattached. If I wanted a global utility instead, I'd choose unbound here and skip the next field entirely. This one choice determines whether your API shows up as a row-level action in the UI or as a standalone call anyone can make. Since I chose entity binding, Dataverse now asks me which table it's bound to. I'm typing quote into bound entity logical name. This single setting is what makes expire quote appear automatically in the command bar and in the Web API, nested under any specific quote record's URL. It's also exactly what will let Power Automate and our Canvas app later say, run this against this particular quote without you writing any plumbing code to fetch or validate the record. Dataverse handles the target for you. Last setting on this screen is function. A function in Dataverse terms is a read-only get style call. Think of it like asking a question that doesn't change anything. An action, which is what is function equals no gives you, can modify data, exactly what expire quote needs to do since it's going to close the quote. I'm leaving this as no, with naming, binding, and type settled. Our next step is writing the actual CPOS behind this API, so let's open Visual Studio. Here's the plugin class that powers expire quote. Because this is a bound custom API, Dataverse automatically hands your code a target input parameter. That's the entity reference pointing at the exact quote row the caller invoked this on, so you never have to ask which record. I grab the organization service, update the quote's state code to closed, and then set an output parameters entry called expired on. That output parameter is exactly the response property you'll register back in the tool, and it's what makes the response strongly typed. Consumers get a real date time, not a string they have to pass themselves. Let's call it for real from a plain CS console app using raw HTTP. Notice the URL pattern. It's the standard web API quotes endpoint, then the quotes ID, then our custom API name appended after a slash. That's what bound really means at the wire level. The operation lives directly under that one record's address. I send a post because it's an action, not a function. And Dataverse responds 200 OK with a JSON body containing expired on. Exactly the type we defined. No custom connector, no guesswork, just metadata-driven consistency. Now Power Automate, Microsoft's workflow tool for connecting apps and automating tasks without code. I'm building a flow that triggers when a quote changes and I need to add an action. Watch what happens when I search the Dataverse connector for expire quote. It just appears using the display name we typed back in the registration tool. That's the payoff of proper metadata. No custom connector to build, no Swagger file to import. Power Automate reads your custom API's shape directly from Dataverse and renders the input fields for you automatically. Now look at the next step in my flow, sending a confirmation email. I want to include when the quote expired, so I open dynamic content and there it is, expired on, listed as an actual date value coming straight from our custom API's response property. I don't pass JSON, I don't split strings, I just pick the field like it's any native output. This is exactly why strongly typed response properties matter. Every consumer downstream, whether it's a flow, an app, or another plugin, gets a clean typed contract. One more consumer, a Canvas app built with PowerFX, Microsoft's Excel-like formula language for describing app behavior. On my details screen, a button calls the bound custom API directly through the quotes table connection, passing this item as the row it's bound to. The result comes back as a typed record, so I can reference var result.expiredOn straight away and show it in a notify banner. Again, no manual response parsing. The Canvas app already knows the shape of the answer because Dataverse told it through the same metadata Power Automate used. Before we wrap up, a few best practices for running custom APIs at enterprise scale. Always prefix your unique names with your own publisher schema, like CRMONCE_expire quote, so you never collide with someone else's solution. Treat published parameter types as permanent. If requirements change, ship a new version, like expire quote v2, rather than breaking every existing caller. Use the isPrivate flag for internal helper APIs that other teams shouldn't call directly. And keep every custom API inside a proper solution, Dataverse's packaging mechanism for application lifecycle management, so you can move and version them cleanly across environments. So to recap, custom APIs give you strongly typed, discoverable server-side logic that replaces the old XML-based custom actions. They can be bound to a table or fully unbound. They flow through the same predictable pipeline every Dataverse operation uses. And once registered, they just show up in the Web API, Power Automate, and Canvas apps with zero extra plumbing. If you build one solid custom API today, you'll save yourself hours of custom connector work tomorrow. If this helped, hit subscribe here on CRMONCE. We're building a full library of practical Dataverse and Power Platform tutorials just like this one. See you in the next video.